need to snip off the centre of our city and isolate a national capital, which is paid for on a day-to-day basis, and keep Tom's streets clean, and people in Skibbereen, and people in Donegal, and people in Tullamore will all be doing that, because it belongs to everybody. It doesn't even belong to people of Cabra, it belongs to all these people, and it's just one neighbourhood among many. Totally different version is somebody trying to take these emerging sets of new centres, and that whole region is going to require the recognition of a big new corridor that's going to develop 15 or 20 kilometres in from the coast, west of the coast, and somebody may try to string that together in a way that has a series of coherently organised settlements as a counterpole to the emerging coastal one. I'm not saying this is good or bad, this is another way it could be done. There's a bipolar city. Many cities have faced up to the fact that the city centre is a pint that cannot take the gallon that needs to be poured into it. And like La Défense in France, they have bitten the bullet and said, we need a counterpole, and we're going to control it, and we're going to nurture it into existence. So Tala and Clondalkin and Blanchardstown, while we all love them dearly, one place has got to be set out as being the stall. That's our counterpole to the capital, and we are taking control of it. And that could take that form, or it could be the form of, say, continuing to develop out along the Naas Road or something like that. But somebody needs to take a point of view as to where the alternative pole to the capital is going to be. Dublin City cannot take the next generation of growth. The region needs a new centre to organise that around. Okay, I've about 2 minutes left, and what I want to do is to put some flesh on what these things might look like, trying to imagine different Dublins, not in a plan way this time, but in what might look like if things that we are currently doing all the time are not done by the agencies and people who run them, but they're done from a plan-led system. Imagine planning a city for cars. Imagine planning a city for our citizens who use cars instead of beating them up. This is the conventional thinking, the two Janus boys, right way up, of how we're probably going to deal with that. If this were led by somebody who was a planner, who regarded the road as being something that's a service to the city, instead of something that shapes it, if we were to say that infrastructure, like transportation, serves and follows cities, if we were to say to ourselves that letting transportation planning our city is like letting a plumber plan your home, we might end up with very different solutions. We might say to ourselves, why are we only building tunnels for railway trains? Why can't we take the bypass under our own city? Why can't the bypass tie up into huge multi-storey car parks in the middle of all Tom's customers in the business city centre? Far from it being a problem out in the middle of Dublin Bay, suddenly it's a massive adventure for the city of a way of breathing life and freeing it from congestion. That kind of stuff could be taken further, where the whole centre of the city has car access underneath it to large car parking nodes. Imagine if instead of pleading with Dublin Bus and to be allowed to have bus services into our newly developed areas, if we took control of it and stood up to 100 years of tramline routes being revisited over and over again, that inevitably are leading to the blotting out of our city centre. That's what's happening. If we were to take control of something like that and say we recognise, we accept, we embrace the fact that the centre of gravity of the population is moving out here, and that's where most of our movement takes place, and it has to have special connections into our inner core, which has got a different set of transportation systems, we suddenly become customers who are out there buying these services from people instead of putting up with them. So I'm going to leave you with a list of these issues that need to be addressed. We need to deal with the burden of the national capital. We need to look at a new centre. We need to manage mobility and not traffic. We need to look at the business of urban land banks and perhaps use this recession or depression as an opportunity to deal with it. We need to look at the redistribution of the costs and benefits of all the big items within the region. And above all, especially you in the Chamber of Commerce, we've got to use this process as a way of making us competitive. We are losing if we haven't completely lost our international competitiveness as a nation at the moment, and only Dublin can bring it back. And we need to have that presented to ourselves as the joined up thinking that's a coherent plan that's accepted and embraced at a national level, We have to prioritise that work and deliver it under a number of different complementary headings. Planning won't deliver it on its own, the business community won't deliver it on its own, central government won't deliver it on its own, but by God, ignoring any one of those things will bring the whole house of cards down, particularly the latter one of the financing of cities. Financing is what rots cities from the inside out by not accepting that and going halfway down the scheme of raising local taxes. Going out into the future, we have three sets of choices about planning. The best one will be if we have a planning system that has hierarchy, that assigns central and orbital roles, that designates a national capital zone. If we agree the location and strategy for a new centre, wherever it might be. If we have plan-led mobility strategies. And if we, above all, work in partnership to achieve specialisations where we can put the best, far the best in particular areas, and those areas will end up as world-class zones that will help Ireland to compete. In terms of competitiveness, the main issue we have to address within the region itself is mobility, the services themselves, the land price issue, the specialisation again, and ways of developing partnerships so that we get synergies. We must deal with finances at a regional level to avoid competition between these emerging centres. We have to find some way of anticipating that revenue generation is going to happen at a local level. Anybody who spends any time up in the House will know that because of the way things are going, for very cynical reasons, the talk is now that it's time to localise fundraising again and get it off the national tax. When that starts to happen, it's initially an easy pass, a hospital pass in fact, by saying Tala can raise its own money, and there you go now, Eddie, you can raise as much money as you like from the people at Tala. And what comes with that is that Eddie and his colleagues not just take money from them, but they say, we're going to lower our rates because we're going to get more factories and more offices out here. And Tom is going to try and do the same thing, but Tom, sorry for picking you all the time, Tom, but Tom and his colleagues in the city centre will try to compete, but they'll suddenly start to find themselves sagging under the burden of carrying Croke Park and carrying Lansdowne Road and carrying St. Patrick's Day Parade, and they won't be able to compete. And you get that flight of business, that flight of capital from the centre. That's what causes Donut City. And we're right on that cusp at the moment. So what we are at the moment is a crossroads. We have a choice of using the crisis to achieve potential and then eventually prosperity, or if we ignore it, division and decline are all that lie ahead. Thank you.